Okay, good evening. This is Dr. John Bennett, broadcasting from Miami, Florida. We're talking here tonight with Brian Levine MD. He's a doctor from New York City, doing a fellowship in reproductive medicine, I believe. Correct,
That's
Brian?
correct.
Uh, Brian, it was very pleasurable to meet him online because he's done so much. And he's one of the few people I've seen that actually blog. Our topic, of course, is Google Glass because this is more or less an introduction to the conference. But I was surprised to see that Brian actually has a blog for Glass, and he has a couple of good posts there if you want to check some good posts out. And one especially was Introduction to Glass, where he kind of leads you through the experience. First of all, takes you through the anatomy of the glass, and then the physiology of the glass, how it works and stuff. So it was kind of a neat thing to see. So we're just going to wing it tonight and just chat. And good evening, Brian.
Well, thanks, John. I really appreciate you taking the time and letting me come on. I'm excited to be part of this group, and I think your conference in Indianapolis is going to be a success because glass is hot, and it's funny looking and it's funny acting, and it might be more of a conversation piece than a medical tool right now, but it definitely is leading people to some really important conversations about how to introduce technology into standard healthcare.
Yeah, I myself have never tried a pair-on, Brian, but hopefully I will in Indianapolis. But I'm just trying to get all the people together from, different parts of the field, and I see that it's pretty well spread out in medicine. I even ran into a forensic pathologist in Germany that uses uh, glass, I guess, doing autopsies. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to engage him. But neurosurgery, obstetric gynecology, like you're doing, and surgery, of course. And one thing I was very excited to see, I'm sure you probably were, also was when I ran across the Medics app out in San Francisco, being used at the Dignity Healthcare group, which uh, actually records the patient visit. So records the patient visit as well as documents the visit online. Are you familiar with that app, Brian?
I'm not, but there's a million and one apps out there. So what if I take you through the glass experience and kind of tell
Sure.
you
Yeah, that would be
about it?
great. That would be
Um,
great.
so this is glass, and we've all seen it on Google, and you can look for the image of it, whatever. And you'll notice that when I put it right on my face, it does not look like the glasses that you're wearing. And so one of the first things that you'll notice is that it changes the patient-doctor interaction. And John, what do you think is the number one question I get from patients when they see it on my face?
Are you recording me?
Exactly. Right? It's funny. It's like the old Verizon commercials. Someone says, "Can you hear me now?" That's synonymous with Verizon. But I
Yeah.
think "Are you recording me?" is unfortunately becoming synonymous with Google Glass.
Yeah.
And the reason is that there's no indicator light here, and you can't tell if I'm recording you right now or not. And I think that was deliberate in Google's manufacturing of the device. I mean, let's remember, Google is a software company. Hardware is something they dabble in, but they're really good at software and infrastructure. So when they came out with a device, they tried for it to be sleek, innovative, different, easy to use. There's no buttons on here, really. There's one button right here to take a picture. Otherwise, on the device, there's really no buttons. You just swipe back and forth. And it's swiping controls and a series of taps or whatnot that get you through. And of course, then it's your voice that dictates from there. But you're right, you can't tell if I'm recording you or not. When you take glass out of the box, it's an awkward experience. I have to be honest, there's nothing natural about it.
Mhm.
You open it up, you have this thing, you don't even know what you're looking at or how to do it. Which is why the majority of us who are glass users, and there's this arrogant group, the glass explorers, that's what they call everyone. Well, no,
Yeah.
it's more test pigs or guinea pigs or whatnot.
There's another
But
word I won't mention.
yeah, suckers. Um,
Blank hole.
yeah, glass holes, right.
Yeah.
We, but they make you go to the Google store to do it because it is an awkward introduction to the device. And the first thing you have to do is you have to marry your Google Glass to a Google account.
Mhm.
So your Gmail, your contacts, everything have to be linked to one device. One account, one device. That's it. And the reason is that they used to control who could have glass. Well, now that it's open to the public and anyone can buy it, I don't know if they've changed that yet, but you still have to link it to your account, and that takes a little time and activity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've been using Glass since the second iteration of the software, and we're up to the 18th version right now.
Wow.
And the Glass experience has improved dramatically. I mean, the speed is there, the responsiveness has improved. Unfortunately, Google in the last week has developed now a 2 gigabyte device. This is only 1 gigabyte. So there's more RAM in the new devices, so a little bit faster, which means that for the loaded apps that are on there, they'll work a little bit quicker. But in general, I found that the Glass experience has improved throughout the time I've had it. You can do things like make phone calls, and I use my iPhone, believe it or not, with my Google Glass. And in fact, there's an app, which I don't know if you can see this here, that's loading, that says Glass.
Right.
And that shows my device. So I can do a lot with my device with my iPhone. In fact, all of my software on my device, if you guys can see this, I can control via my iPhone. So I can load and unload software to my Glass via my phone or the web.
So essentially, the iPhone is your cloud.
The iPhone is my interaction with the cloud, right?
Okay.
So Google Glass lives in the cloud.
Okay.
It's cloud-based. But what it lets me do is it lets me interact with my Glass because, right, there's no buttons here. You know, when I first started, I said there's no buttons, there's only tapping and voice controls. So the phone is your instrument to allow you to have more speed and control through the device.
Okay.
Now, you and I tonight are talking on a Google Hangout, and the Hangouts, unfortunately, have been removed in one of the most recent software upgrades or iterations, which has probably been the biggest detriment right now of Google Glass. I loved the Hangout feature on Google Glass because as a doctor, that's where it's at.
Right.
The reason to wear Glass, I mean, literally everyone can disconnect from the Hangout after this one sentence, but the reason to wear Glass is to have the first-person user experience.
Okay.
That is what Glass is about to me. Now, other people think about other ways to use Glass, but in the most basic form with no extra software required, no extra work, you used to be able to broadcast what I see to someone else.
Okay.
So if you're a first-year medical student and you want to know what it's like to operate on somebody, but you're stuck in the books, imagine signing onto the internet, signing into a Google Hangout, and you just learned about the gastrointestinal tract, and now you watch a general surgeon actually do bowel surgery, first-person viewer. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Where his head goes, he goes. Now, I've done work in the third world, and I've been to West Africa, and of course, the first thing that came to my mind is the other opportunity. For me to see someone who may not be well-trained or maybe practicing above their scope of training and the ability to actually offer them advice in a challenging situation. So imagine an obstetrician, or more importantly, a midwife or a physician extender who's delivering a baby, and all of a sudden now the baby gets stuck. Well, if you had an obstetrician who was watching online, who could then offer some advice on how to do forceps or a vacuum delivery or how to deal with a shoulder dystocia, you can now give first-person advice. And that was with Hangouts. That was with simple, loaded software on the device. If Google Glass was just for Hangouts, I think it still would sell. But you and I would also have a very short Hangout tonight if that's all we were talking about was Hangouts back and forth on the device.
Well, let me just say one thing. Are you familiar with Pedro Gyn, the surgeon, the orthopedic surgeon from Spain? I guess he did a lot of Hangouts too, and he did a Hangout with Homero Rivas at Stanford, and they went you probably saw it. They had an operation that they were doing together.
You might do some pretty challenging technical operation. It was a knee or a hip, but yeah.
Well, he's gonna email me a presentation of exactly what you're talking about, the global operating theater, and I'll be interested. I'll make sure I'll send you a link for that, or you can watch it.
Yeah.
We're going to put that on, and I think I mean, just the name of it is kind of leading. He's probably going to discuss that fact of having a global operating theater where physicians can interact to an area where they might need some help.
Well, it's exactly that is. Think about the role of the internet, right? I mean, when the Da Vinci robot first came out, everyone thought that was going to revolutionize medicine. That the robot would be parked in somewhere in Afghanistan or Iraq, and someone, at Bethesda would be operating on that patient from afar. Well, truth be told, as someone who does robotic surgery, that doesn't happen, right? It's the robots are crossing the patient, and I'm somewhere in the room, and it's working that way.
Right.
But the concept is alive, which is of distance medicine or guided medicine, or how to have physician extenders. So if you want to make a difference in the third world, train a whole bunch of nurses and midwives and PAs to use Google Glass. And then when they come into a tough situation, let them call back for help. Let them phone a physician and then get a video chat going where they can get one-on-one information. Because imagine this. You're operating on a patient and you have a physician who's helping you from afar. You can hear them because the way the Google Glass works is there's no speaker, but it conducts through the bones of your ear, so you can hear things, even in a loud environment. And I could shoot pictures to someone where they would be able to see anatomy drawings. In a Google Glass, for example, there's this Hangout tool. I don't know if you've ever used it, where you can draw on the screen, and you could draw lines, all over the screen here, and I can draw on you, and then I can annotate this.
Okay.
So the same thing. You could have an annotated Hangout. Cut here, not here. Tie here, not there.
Oh, okay.
Or imagine for board certification, right? Like, if you want to be board certified and you need to be approved to do a certain procedure or accreditation, it's a logical step that they say, look, just practice your field and record 10 situations where you actually do an appendectomy, where you do a cholecystectomy, where you do a bowel resection. And the board examiners could just watch you do it.
Right.
And that'd all be through a Google Hangout. And that's just basic software, like literally Google Hangout software, no extra money, nothing. Now, as we talk about this, I'm sure the first thing going through your mind is HIPAA compliance and patient privacy. So before we started this chat, you and I were talking about what is the role of that, and we were talking about Pristine.io, which to me is a fascinating company. Kyle Samani is the guy behind it. He's a 20-something-year-old genius who basically has figured out how to have a protected patient interaction through glass, where the doctor can literally broadcast and do telemedicine and hangouts through glass without worrying about the patient privacy issues of what computer are they on, what network are they on, what's happening, things like that. So to answer your first question, which was a very long-winded question, what do I think of glass? I think glass in its previous iteration with its previous software was phenomenal for medicine. Now I'm reaching a little bit to figure out how do I use glass every day and how do I integrate this into my workflow.
Now, do you use it when you go on rounds at the hospital, or just in certain cases?
I don't anymore. I find that patients find it to be a little obtrusive.
Okay.
So I really reserve it for the operating theater, where it's a little more protected of a space, both for the patient and, of course, and for me. Now, there are many different applications out there, and I'm actually waiting to hear back from it right now from an EHR developer, where they're looking to develop glass-specific EHR apps. So some of the great stuff that you could do is, for example, when you're seeing a patient, you could have their history right next to you. Or you could record the entire patient interaction and then take your notes later. Or one of the things I love is there's a translation app that's currently active right now on my glass called iTranslate. And I literally, called WordLens, and literally I can look at someone's records in another language, and it translates it into English for me.
Wow. That's the, what you said about the recording the visit. I think it's iCronus. Is there?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the ones that are doing that. And Augmetics.com is, I think they're doing that too. Which to me, when I saw that, I said, wow, this applies to all doctors, because every single doctor complains about too much paperwork. And patients complain about the doctor always burying his face in the chart, or nowadays, I guess you guys bury your face in the iPad,
Right.
punching screens and stuff like that. It certainly would be wonderful if you could look at it, almost look at the patient with your Google Glass without having to glance down at either an iPad or a chart.
Well,
Um,
the other thing is, if you were to take something like Dragon, owned by Nuance, dictation software, and if you were able to transcribe that interaction, you can then make sure that you didn't miss anything,
yeah,
right?
yeah. That's one criticism I mentioned that to Paul Sotek, a glass surgeon in Indianapolis. He's running the conference, and he said Dragon is not quite there yet. He has to do a lot of corrections. Do you find that? Have you tried that at all?
You
Dictating
know, I,
from
I, I've
Dragon?
actually, it's funny. I've been an early Dragon adopter since medical school. So I've actually always found Dragon to be phenomenal. And I find that people have bad Dragon experiences when they have one of three issues. The first one is that they don't want to conform to the way the Dragon's supposed to be used. So they
Okay.
pick up the microphone and they say, attending note, patient seen, examined, agree with above. Please see, resident note for full details. Thank you. And they mumble and they don't speak clearly. And
Okay.
so you think about when you use Dragon, what would a transcriptionist get? That's where you need to talk. The second thing is, people don't realize that when they go from computer to computer or microphone to microphone, you need to update your profile. So if you're going to use it on your Mac and you're going to use the computer's built-in microphone, then you're going to use the power mic somewhere else, you're going to have different experiences. So you need to update those.
Okay.
And the third thing is, which is the most critical thing that I show people, is that if you're using Citrix to get into your electronic health record, where essentially you're linking from afar, Dragon goes at one pace, and your EHR might be refreshing at another pace. And if they're not synced, you're going to have an awful experience. There's free software you download from the Dragon website. It's called vSync. Your hospital probably paid for it when it set up your Dragon account anyway. You download that, and everything's perfect. So I've found Dragon works, and in fact, I know of this 80-year-old Indian physician who had such a thick accent that she thought she was going to have to close her OB practice because everything had to go EHR. And she
Okay.
was able to get Dragon up and running, and she literally was a one-finger typer, like the one finger for everything. Well, she
Yeah.
was dictating into her chart better than the nurses were.
Really? Wow. Wow. Well, what percentage? I guess you do a lot of chart correction once you dictate, or do you go over your charts once you dictate them on Dragon?
What you say is 99% of the time of what you see.
Okay.
Everyone needs to remember that what you see is what you submit.
Yeah. Right.
So ultimately, you're responsible for checking it. Now, what's amazing to me is the workflow. Let's say you're someone like myself who does a lot of surgeries in one day, 6, 7 surgeries in one day. The average operative note takes about 4 minutes to dictate. Let's give it 5. So
Okay.
that's 35 minutes of dictation. But then that's going to go off to a transcriptionist. And believe it or not, that transcriptionist is probably using Dragon for the initial transcription. And
Right.
she's correcting it. But then you're going to have to get that back. You're to log back into EHR, reopen it again, read it, correct it, submit it. That's about another 5 to 6 minutes. So what should have been 35 minutes of total time is now an hour and 10 minutes. And if you lose 30 minutes 1 to 2 times a week, that's an hour away from your family a week, that's 4 hours a month, you can do the math. That's
Right.
literally 2 days where you could have been home, or an extra weekend a year that you chose to spend in the hospital by just not using dictation software from the get-go.
Yeah.
So to me, Dragon makes sense, and dictation makes sense, and I think Glass will go there. I think Glass will become a dictation tool.
Yeah. Well, it's heading that way. It's heading that way, and certainly any improvement on the administrative task of a doctor brings them back to healthcare again. Doctors spend so much darn time doing administrative tasks. I don't have to tell you, but any doctor can relate to that. If you, when I heard about Augmetics, the platform that automatically takes dictation and video, I said that's almost as good as penicillin
Right.
for doctors, because it's such a huge advance in healthcare, because it doesn't always have to be a medicine or a device. It can be a time saver. If you save a tremendous amount of time, that is of value to healthcare and to doctors, certainly.
Absolutely. Well, one of my favorite ideas about the use of glass is going back to the hangout idea. Picture this. Anesthesiologists, their entire lives have been changed by certified nurse anesthetists. By having a CRNA there, you can now extend where an anesthesiologist can work. Now, if I was an anesthesiologist, though, I'd be a little paranoid, saying, what's going on in that OR? What's going on in that OR? Right? Because those are locked doors that are typically far away from the one anesthesiologist. So if you had 4 ORs running at once, and you're one anesthesiologist, and you have 4 CRNAs, if you put Google Glass on each of them, you could check in on each OR instantaneously. Or you could load 4 video chats up at once on your iPad and just watch them and observe them. So, I mean, again, this is just straight hangout technology, video chatting, but there's a role for that in healthcare.
Well, Leslie Garson's going to talk about that. That's another doc that Kyle has reached that we mentioned before. And I briefly talked to him in a hangout, and he said exactly that. It says it allows him to keep closer track of what's going on with his CRNAs, because that's the state of the art. A lot of patients think that it's one anesthesiologist, one room, but you and I know, and most doctors know, that's not the way it works.
Well, it's more than just that, but I think the CRNA example is probably the most logical one. Or, think if you're an emergency room physician and you put these on paramedics. Now, instead of just trusting the paramedic to tell you about the clinical situation, you can get one-on-one live advice, right? The paramedic can not only show the scenario, not only send information to that doctor via video, that doctor can now actually appropriately guide the care and therapy of that patient.
Well, I was talking to that about that concept with Raphael Grossman. Of course, it didn't go very far because he's such a busy guy. He talks all over the country about his experience with Google Glass. But he works at a trauma center in Bangor, Maine, and he didn't invent, but adopted the technology of using iPods, not iPads, but iPods, to do just that, to transmit the image from the scene of the accident away from Portland, or Bangor, Maine, where his trauma center is at. And he had quite good success. And I guess the next step would be Google Glass. And I think University of Arizona is doing that right now, too. They've got a bunch of grants that I just posted it today on the website, a grant, I think, to use telemedicine and teletrauma, essentially, to transmit the images back to the trauma centers. Because some trauma centers in some states, I don't know what New York is like, but some states it has to cover a huge area. And, of course, surgeons can't run on the ambulance or whatever. If they can rely on accurate images from Google Glass, and that brings the hands free for the EMTs. They don't have to carry an iPod or an iPad to show the image. They can put it on their head, and they got their hands free to extricate. They got the hands free to start an IV or whatever. So that's kind of a no-brainer use of a Google Glass.
You're absolutely correct. And there's 1,000,001 applications of just the simple hangouts. Now, of course, there's other things. If I was an anesthesiologist, I would actually want the patient's vitals to be in front of my face, right? Like, I'd want to get all the patient's vitals right here so that I can literally go back to my field of practice. If I was working on a double heart or, a heart transplant, a lung transplant, one of these very complicated transplants where there's so much tweaking to do to the machines and to the perfusion or whatever, having the hands free and having the vitals in front of you would be invaluable experience. And so, that's where I think it's going to go. Pushing medical information straight to the doctor's eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I was watching a video with John Nosta. He was talking about how other professions are going to get involved with the evolution of glass. Engineers, application writers, app writers, and stuff, and they'll do the contributions. And we were talking about that last night about how the shape of glass now, how it's shaped now, is going to change radically depending upon its use, and it'll be adapted to that particular specialty. Like the obstetrician's use will be different from the cardiologist's use. There'll be different shapes, different types of devices on each Google Glass. I think it'll change radically in the next couple of years. And just like John Nosta said, engineers will be involved in that.
Well, you know, again, the most common thing people say to me is, "Hey, can I put them on?" And if you look at it, it's pretty comfortable. They're pretty easy, and you'll notice as you and I have been talking all this time, you probably stopped noticing that I was wearing them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, eventually, they do normal.
Get used to it. Yeah, you get used to it.
So absolutely.
Yeah. Where do you see? Is there anything that we haven't covered? Where do you think? Well, obviously, and I read this. It'll impact the areas of medicine where it's hands. You need to use your hands, which obviously is surgery. And I foresee it being used in busy clinics also. Like we've all worked at busy inner city clinics and inner city hospitals. Record retrieval would be so useful because you can remember working at those busy clinics how much time you had to spend chasing charts and chasing records.
So, you know, I think there's a role for it there. I think the most exciting role for me is in healthcare education and medical education. Not just doctors, dentists, right? I mean, they're working in small little spaces. How do you show someone that you know your skill or your craft? Put on Google Glass. Nurses, when they're out talking to patients, don't make it awkward. Don't have an observer there. Have them wear Google Glass. Let's see how they do. Or put someone in a challenging scenario. Put someone in a multilingual experience where now all of a sudden they're not a natural Spanish speaker and you want to see if they're proficient. Before you certify them to go out, let's check to see how well they really do. Let's see how they do in the real clinical environment. I think that's the role of Glass. Is it's going to be a tool that's going to be seen to be indispensable in healthcare education.
Now, how much getting to your specialty? How much is it used? Have you used it much in the OR for teaching purposes?
Just for teaching, and in fact, it's more in static than dynamic, which means taking a video or a picture to show someone more than actually using the one-on-one mentor-mentee application of it.
Oh, okay. So you're not streaming it outside the OR, basically just videoing it.
Yeah.
It's not on the internet. It's basically just
static video back and forth, side loaded off. Then you can show someone, and you don't have to get the patient's information and their consent to be videotaped or photographed, which you do before the surgical procedure.
Right.
But when you work in a hospital, it's very hard to stream anything and have that be approved by the hospital.
Right. Well, because Hipaa. You know I was talking to some surgeons today, and they said it's actually just if it's not on the internet, it's just a camera. It's just basically a camera in the OR, and there's nothing special about it. It just happens to be a well-positioned camera on the surgeon's forehead, which makes a big difference.
And it's a very good camera.
Good quality camera, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't wait to try them on, but I know just from if I go back to working in the emergency room, I'm really going to look forward to using it. How about in the emergency rooms where you work at now? Do you see it used much?
Not yet. I think
at all. Not yet.
Probably a year away. You know, you see someone there, here or there. The hard part is for what application, right? What app are they using? Are they using an app that's either on their own, or are they using an app that's agreed to by the hospital? I think you'll see it more at the urgent care clinics. That's where you probably see people using it because you have a little more freedom to use it those places.
Right. You don't have to go through hospital permission. Well, we also have some ER. The ER guys speaking this month. They're also under Kyle's aegis. A couple of ER docs, Dr. Wu's, one doc from Brown University. They used it mostly for skin problems in the ER that they transmit to dermatologists.
I think for consultative reasons, it's great. But again, you could do that with an iPhone. You know, you could do that with a camera. What it just does is, as you said, it's a well-positioned camera that works well, that does allow for real-time hangouts or streaming information, which is phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be exciting, and I'm looking forward to hearing from all the docs. And it's even used in, we have a doctor from Temple speaking about its use in neurosurgery. He's using it in neurosurgery, and I don't know if it's a live stream or just he's just videoing it, but he's very anxious to get applications made. And matter of fact, he's collaborating with the neurosurgeon from Netherlands, Peter Kerben, who's a very internet smart guy. They're going to try to get together. And he's one of the few doctors I've met that he actually writes applications, and I don't have that expertise. I don't know if you do, but not many doctors can write applications. It's rare.
I can program, but not at this level.
Yeah, I think to do that's something I'll probably address. Programmers essentially, what's the difference between programming for a regular app and a glass app, and is there a difference, or would you happen to know is there a difference programming wise?
You have to know how to do Android, and I think there's some nuances there. But I'll tell you, as part of the Glass Explorer program, there's a bevy of stuff out there, and you can easily go onto there's a special Glass discussion website where you can go on there and talk to other developers and programmers and see how some of them are really facile and they're really able to get it up and running quickly.
Well, you know Google Plus, correct? The community Google Plus. Well, that's an excellent place to have that type of interaction because I've seen it. There's a couple of communities. I believe one's called emaker. They're collaborating on the 3D printing of artificial hands and wrists for kids that are born without congenitally have absence of a limb. The engineers collaborate on that G Plus room and patients from third world countries actually say, they give their measurements and they fit them for a 3D artificial hand, and it's very low cost. But you can see the community in action and actually working at something like that. That's why I think it'd be a good place for developers and doctors to collaborate. We're going to offer that too on the weekend, Brian. We're going to have a gentleman from LA. He's a Glass app developer. We're going to have an hour dedicated to anybody any doctor, and yourselves included, if you want to come by on Saturday at, I believe it's 1 o'clock. We're going to have a hangout where doctors can just drop in and kind of like brainstorm about ideas they have, because you know that most doctors, when they first try this on or they get used to using it, they're going to say, "Oh, if I could only do this. Oh, if I could only do that." And every specialty is going to have different needs and wants.
Sure.
And I think that the Google Hangout is a perfect place for these guys to interact. You could break scrub, sit down and say, "Hey, I got this idea. I want to do this." And in a Hangout type of thing where the developer is, reachable by a Hangout. I think that app this platform will fit well with the evolution of development of Glass applications.
Well, I look forward to it, and I'm happy to come back again and talk more about it. And I think you have one heck of a program lined up, because you're really going to dig into the individual pieces of it. And instead of just making Glass a single discussion tonight and just letting me be an introduction, I think the fact that you have real experts coming in and people who are using it in different ways, it's going to be fun. And I'd love to drop in again and chat with them and chat with you.
Yeah, please do. Anytime you see a discussion you'd like to be part of, just shoot me an email, and you're welcome to be on the panel. And it's good to see another geek out there that loves Glass, and I'm looking forward to trying to set on, seeing what it's really like. But I enjoy hearing from you guys all over the place. It's a field I can just see. It's so dynamic. It's just going to get bigger and bigger, and it's good to be on the ground floor to watch it grow. It's almost like a planting something in the garden. So I thank you very much, and you're welcome anytime. Thank you very much, Brian.
Have a good one.
Okay.